Well, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the final session of IRENA's third Innovation Week. This is our biannual event showcasing innovative solutions for the global energy transition. This year's event is focused on innovative renewable solutions for industry and transport. My name is Paul Durant. I'm the head of end-use sectors and bioenergy in IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn, Germany. It's my pleasure to be guiding you through today's discussions. We've had 7 excellent sessions so far this week with over 100 expert speakers from over 35 countries. We started with our high-level opening where ministers from 4 continents, including the commissioners for the European Commission and the African Union, discussed the imperative for action on emissions from all sectors of the economy and explored national and regional plans to accelerate progress, particularly in industry and transport. On Monday and Tuesday, we focused on the supply side of decarbonising industry and transport with in-depth discussions on direct electrification, on the production of hydrogen and e-fuels, and on the sustainable supply of biofeedstocks and biofuels production. Yesterday, we turned to the demand side with detailed discussions with sector representatives and experts exploring both the challenges and the solutions for industry in our morning session and for transport in our afternoon session. This morning, we had inspiring discussions involving young entrepreneurs showcasing their innovative approaches and the impact they can have. Videos, recordings of those sessions, plus summaries and the slides are all available on the Innovation Week website. In today's session, we bring all of that rich discussion together and look ahead at where we need to go to next. Now, you see the agenda for today up on the screen. In a moment, Dolf Gielen, IRENA's Director of Innovation and Technology, will summarise his key takeaways from this week's discussions. Then Elizabeth Press, IRENA's Director for Planning and Programme Support, will place that technology discussion in the context of action on climate change, in discussion with representatives from the COP25 and COP26 presidencies. In the third part of today's discussion, Rabia Faruqi, IRENA's Director of Knowledge, Policy and Finance, will broaden our discussions beyond technology and explore the policy actions needed to accelerate progress with a diverse panel of senior representatives from public and private sector bodies. And then finally, IRENA's Director General, Francesco La Camera, will wrap the whole week up with his closing remarks. Before we get into those discussions, I've just got a few housekeeping items to bring to your attention. As you probably realise, all of you are currently muted and will remain so throughout the event. However, please use the Q&A room in order to post your thoughts, your comments, tell us who you are, why you're interested in joining us today, and your reflections on what you're hearing. But please do also use that Q&A function to share questions with us, and our moderators will attempt to use some of those questions, time allowing, during the course of the discussions. Apologies in advance, we won't get through all of the questions, but we will make note of them and we'll try to use them to inform further discussions. Finally, please note this is a public event. It's been recorded and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So therefore, Chatham House rules do not apply to these discussions. All the recordings, the slides, the summary notes will be available on the Innovation Week website, including today's discussion, hopefully by as soon as tomorrow afternoon. So, without further ado, let's move to our first speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Dolf Gielen, Director, Innovation and Technology from IRENA. Dolf, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. Welcome to all. Thank you for joining for this final session of the IRENA's third Innovation Week. We've had a very rich discussion over the last 4 days, and it's not easy to do that justice. So I'll try to provide you a few highlights. You will have noticed that this one was different from the previous two innovation weeks due to circumstances. We had to go online. But in terms of attendance, we had over 100 expert speakers, panelists, and facilitators. And we had a registered and a participating audience of 1,597 so far, representing 1,274 organizations from over 140 countries. These are record numbers. They indicate a high and increasing interest in the topic of innovation and technology for the energy transition, but also in the format of this Innovation Week. This time, the focus was very much on end-use sectors and sector coupling. High-level insights. I think one issue which clearly came up was standards and certification for clean energy vectors, such as renewable electricity, green hydrogen, and green commodities. A second topic that was repeatedly mentioned was the need for an enabling infrastructure, for example, for transport of hydrogen. There was a general recognition that technologies are available, but we still need to bring the cost down significantly through technology, learning, and upscaling. We need enabling policy frameworks, but also clear transition plans to make this transition happen at the speed that is needed. And it was repeatedly mentioned that this energy transition is interacting with other major innovations, such as digitalization. It was repeatedly highlighted. So you have to look how that's going to how you create synergies there. From the high-level session, as was mentioned, EU Energy Commissioner and African Union Commissioner started with a scene-setting discussion. Ministers from the UAE and the UK addressed the audience, while ministers from Canada, Germany, and Indonesia offered their perspectives on the way ahead. The post-pandemic recovery, the role of green hydrogen in the energy transition, as well as the central role of bioenergy, were mentioned in these discussions. New cooperation opportunities between Europe and Africa were highlighted, for example, in hydrogen and hydrogen commodity trade. And the importance of public-private partnerships was underlined by the World Economic Forum, and its mission possible platforms on how to decarbonize sectors were highlighted as a mechanism to facilitate this transition. Following this high-level session, we heard from around 70 experts through the 6 deep dive sessions. I will give you some of the highlights in a moment. It was important that we organized these sessions together with key partners. We worked with the Electric Power Research Institute from the United States on electrification, with the Hydrogen Council on the hydrogen session, the Global Biomass Energy Partnership on the bioeconomy, with Mission Possible and World Economic Forum on the industry transformation, the International Transport Forum on transport, and finally with Initiate and the SDG 7 Youth Constituency on the entrepreneurship session. So thanks to these partners for the fruitful cooperation, and I would also like to thank the large number of organizations and individuals that actively participated in this week in other roles. Already several follow-up activities have emerged. For example, for the Moroccan Power to X Summit in November, they want to repeat the session we had on hydrogen and build on that. We are talking to the leadership group for industry transition, the governance forum, on the insights from the industry sessions and the follow-up. And we're talking to the UK presidency on the follow-up on the what these insights mean for the next COP, for example, also in the form of the Race to Zero Hydrogen Forum on 16 November. Now, going a little bit deeper on the sessions. So the first session was on smart electrification of end-use sectors. We talked about the importance of digitalization in unlocking smart electrification, the need for innovative market models and regulations, the new business models and new ways to operate the systems. We stressed that the preferences and role of consumers will shape the effectiveness of electrification strategies. So there is need for a dialogue and a better understanding of what consumers want. Monetizing demand-side flexibility for new market designs is currently one of the main challenges for unlocking this source of flexibility. We see that regulation is key in this transformation, and enabling regulation deserves more attention. And in general, electrification is seen as a key step, and also in sector coupling to combine renewable electricity with decarbonisation of end-use sectors. On the second session on green hydrogen, the first part focused on electrolyzers. We learned that there is rapid upscaling ongoing from megawatt scale towards gigawatt scale. There is various countries focusing on this, but also various manufacturers, and there is very much a modular way of dealing with this upscaling. Balance of plant deserves more attention for system cost reduction apart from the electrolyzer stack focused efforts. And there's a need for transition plans and roadmaps. In Europe, for example, the Clean Hydrogen Alliance is the forum focusing on this. We had a discussion around how to define efficiency of electrolyzers, and there was an agreement that that is a topic where green standards and certification can contribute, apart of course from standards and certification for clean or green supply. As we want to accelerate this transition, there is a need for enabling policy frameworks that provide a premium for green hydrogen to enable industry scale up and cost reduction. Integration of green hydrogen production with solar and wind variability is considered not a major challenge. However, ramps and high current variability do accelerate degradation of electrolyzers, but cost-effective solutions to mitigate these effects exist. Second part of that forum, of that session, focused on green hydrogen commodities such as ammonia and methanol. Countries are already cooperating to build hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels markets, but that can be expanded, that discussion can be expanded to include also other countries which are still at an earlier stage. There is, of course, a market for greening existing commodities such as ammonia, but ammonia and methanol could, for example, also be used as fuels, and that could significantly expand their market compared to current situation. There is a need to combine variability on the supply side with these variable renewables and maybe also electrolyzers operated that way with the continuous operation of these chemical plants, but there's a feeling that that can be resolved by suitable strategies. Now moving to the third session on the bioeconomy. We talked about the strategies, how to expand sustainable supply of biomass. And a second panel focused on the projects to broaden sustainable production of biofuels. There's a feeling that bioenergy can contribute significantly to this transition because it has biomass has some unique characteristics. However, there is a need to better communicate the value of biomass and to address negative perceptions. Biomass and biomass value chain require a holistic approach from the biomass supply towards end use. And the biomass used for industry and transport should be seen in the context of the entire bioeconomy to create the maximum benefits. Then on industry transformation, we had separate sessions on iron and steel, cement, and chemical and petrochemical sectors. There was an agreement that interesting new technology options are emerging, such as green hydrogen-based production of direct reduced iron. Already mentioned ammonia and methanol, and in general, green hydrogen was seen as a key feedstock. But apart from technology, there is a need for enabling infrastructure, such as hydrogen transportation systems and supply of renewable power, as well as the enabling policy frameworks to ensure that there is indeed a business case and a level playing field. Also, there is more attention needed for carbon accounting standards and certification for green sourcing to really make clear what the benefits are and to create this distinct green sourcing incentive to support that. On transport, there is now across all transport modes a sense that there is an urgency to decarbonize, and there are important ongoing efforts, not only in passenger cars, but now also in how to decarbonize aviation, shipping, and road freight sectors. Technologies are there, but the economics still need improvement. The market cannot solve this alone. It will require policy intervention, such as carbon pricing, but this may not be enough, and there may also be need for other incentives and other ways to reduce these costs. Infrastructure is seen as a critical issue, and it needs to be in place ahead of the demand ramp up, and some critical choices may need to be made on fuel types to inform infrastructure decisions. The hard to decarbonize character not only comes from the technology, but also because some of these are globally competing sectors, and there need to be strategies in place to move broadly at the same time worldwide, which calls for sectoral approaches. There is a need for a managed, planned and progressive approach. While action is urgent, we can't do everything at once. We're making progress, but delivery will take time, and it will be a gradual transition. Now, the final session on entrepreneurship and innovation for the green energy agenda. We heard from solutions for transport, industry and buildings by 10 young entrepreneurs from countries in Africa, Asia and Europe. There is a strong drive for entrepreneurship in this, because it's also seen as the industry of the future, which also will create the jobs and the industries of the future. Digitalization was a red thread throughout, as it's a key enabler for new affordable solutions and business models. And we had various examples, for example, in e-mobility, but also in hydrogen generators, integrated data management, off-grid energy access, and online battery sharing platforms. So we heard some interesting recommendations there, how to further foster innovations and how to build skills, to think big while also making the business case, to be innovative, not just in terms of technology, but also in financing and in collaboration models. So these were some of the highlights we captured. This is very much work in progress. So if you think we missed some key points, please drop us an email, and we'll be very happy to include that. So we will further build on this in our forthcoming work. We have upcoming studies on biojet, renewable methanol, electrolyzer cost reduction, and electrification of end users in the coming months. And as mentioned, we'll also try to feed this into the climate process. So there's still a long way to go in energy transition. And of course, given the success of this edition, we are already starting to think about next edition of Innovation Week. Also there, your ideas are very welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my summary remarks, and I hand back. Thank you.
Very many thanks, Dolf. So as you've made clear, we've had a really rich discussion this week with lots of valuable insights, and very much hope that that will inform our future work and your work as well. So we've been discussing solutions for reducing and eliminating emissions from industry and transport. The reason we're focusing on that is the imperative for global action on climate change. So now let's turn to our first panel to hear more about how climate action is progressing. To moderate that discussion, let me hand over to Elizabeth Press, IRENA's Director for Planning and Programme Support, who will introduce our speaker. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dolf. Wonderful to be with all of you this afternoon. And you know, this is our third Innovation Week, and whenever we have one, I get really excited because the speed of change is dizzying, and it's always great to see what is going on around the world and across sectors. And this is the first time we were tackling end-use sectors, transport and industry, and it's been really interesting and exciting to listen to the latest developments. So in this session, as Paul mentioned, we will step back a little and contextualize this interesting innovation discussion in the context of a climate crisis and climate change that is a major driver of this innovation, but also it requires it. It's a major need to make a change that is necessary. We have two exceptional speakers with us today, Gonzalo Munoz of Chile and Catherine Brenner of the UK. For those of you who might not be deeply immersed in the climate negotiations, let me just mention that Chile was presiding in 2019 over COP25, and the UK is incoming presidency of COP26, which was supposed to happen this year, but like many things that changed this year, has been pushed to 2021. So just a few words on Gonzalo and Kath. Gonzalo was appointed by Chile to be the high-level champion to drive climate action and engage broad range of stakeholders to contribute to climate action. I worked with Gonzalo very closely the last couple of years, and the function is well deserved. He's been an inspiring person to work with. He comes from he's an entrepreneur and has been at the forefront of the environmental innovation in Chile for many years now. He did something very interesting. He was reinventing the country's recycling industry to basically imagine the future without waste. And in that context, he created a company called Three Cyclists in 2009, which has grown since to be present all over Latin America. Kat has been a climate champion in her own right. Her professional life has been dedicated to clean energy, environmental finance, science, and engineering. She is right now the Director of International Climate and Energy in the UK's Department for Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy, and she leads the Science, Energy and Climate team. So we're gonna have, I actually don't see them on the screen, and I'm not sure whether that's a technology glitch or I'm not supposed to see them. So I will just proceed with the conversation, because this is going to be a conversation with the three of us. And I will start with asking Gonzalo to share with us a little bit his observations from the work, from his work with the non-party stakeholders as a high-level champion. Gonzalo, we're looking at the very difficult sectors, industry and transport. And what have you observed in your work during the last couple of years?
Well, first, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to Irina for setting this opportunity of speaking about the importance of the energy transition that we're living nowadays. And in that sense, of course, first, renewable electricity is key. We know that, and the general decarbonization, be electrification with renewables, is already absolutely underway. But further focus is needed, both on expanding renewable electricity with also the relevant infrastructure for its efficient use in harder to evade industrial sectors, and also deeper decarbonization via elements that Dolph mentioned very well, right? We know that we need much more green hydrogen, natural climate solutions like use of biomass for sustainable fuels and chemical production, and I'm sure we will need also carbon capture use and storage. Knowing that renewable electricity is going very well in many ways, we now also need heavy industries to move faster as a absolutely critical sector. We know that sectors as cement, steel, aluminium, and chemicals represent so far the largest end-use sector, both in terms of final energy demand and also greenhouse gas emissions. So direct CO2 emissions currently account in those sectors for about 25% of the total energy-related and processed CO2 emissions. There's also increased demand in these sectors for the use of these new opportunities in terms of energy, and we're working very hard on helping them. You will see that definitely in the pathways and the system transformation map that will be launch at the end of this year, but there's also an increased demand for zero emission freight options, and as again Dolph mentioned some of them, and we're absolutely aware on how important the transition in those sectors will also be very helpful to decrease and bring to zero the general trading emissions, and believe me, and you know it even better than me, the commitments are coming. The commitments to achieving net zero by mid-century at the latest are really rapidly expanding, showing appetite for decarbonization, including in industry and transport, even in COVID times. So we are hopeful, and we're seeing things happening in the right direction, and we're here to support those commitments and help those processes to go faster, and have some of those be part of the future announcement in the short term.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Kat, how's the UK building momentum to COP26 in these difficult areas?
Elizabeth, thank you very much, and thank you so much for the invitation to speak at this event today. And I really welcome my Chile's colleagues' comments as well. It's such an exciting time to be working in this space. It's an absolute pleasure to join you for the final session of this year's Innovation Week. Echoing my minister's speech at the start of the week, I'd like to take this opportunity to say how much we value Irina's commitment to our joint work on emissions reduction as part of the recently launched Energy Transitions Council. The Council is going to bring together leaders from government, industry and financial institutions to support countries' transition to clean energy systems. As we look forward to, we've taken the mantle, and thank you to Chile, from COP25 to COP26 next year. We've defined 5 sectors which need particular attention. Some of those we've already talked about, but nature-based solutions, adaptation, resilience, finance, clean transport, and of course, clean energy. And with industry as one of the most significant consumers of energy, the UK supports the international efforts to spur innovation. And we're really excited about what we're seeing in the hydrogen space at the moment, and international collaboration around CCUS and the increasing market for low carbon industrial products. In terms of transport, the UK is running an international campaign to at least double the pace of the transition to zero emission vehicles. This includes creating new political forum for ministers and the automotive markets to come together to discuss what they can do in innovation in this space. You know, the UK itself aims to be one of the most forward-leaning countries in low-carbon transport, and we announced last week our first hydrogen transport hub, which will bring together government and industry to support innovation to make travel greener. It's true that only by working together, though, and global cooperation around innovation holds the key to us, is central to our COP26 presidency. We're really pleased to hear 2 weeks ago that China announced their ambition to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060, and California committed to phasing out internal combustion in vehicles by 2035. However, there are challenges ahead, and the net zero announcement by the UK was a huge announcement for us. And innovation and new technology is going to be key to helping us meeting that carbon neutrality by the mid-century. And so we've announced a series of policy measures to help support innovation to deliver clean growth and net zero. Particularly, we're excited about hydrogen to transform the energy outlook of industry and transport. And we've announced recently our development of low carbon hydrogen through our Energy Innovation Programme. We've also committed to publishing a hydrogen strategy in early 2021. And Minister Kwarteng has established a Hydrogen Advisory Council. We are also seeing a lot of innovation around CCUS, which we think is going to be essential to meeting our net zero target. And we're committed to deploying CCUS this decade and sees an opportunity for us, like many others are, of becoming a global leader in this space. And we announced a CCS infrastructure fund earlier this year to enhance long-term competitiveness of the UK industrial regions in providing at least 800 million to establish CCS in at least 2 UK clusters over the next decade. So we're committing in the UK to a shift towards low carbon technology. We're incentivising growth off the back of that, and we're hoping to spur innovation and drive the sector forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat, very much. There is really a wide-ranging agenda that you're putting in place, and quite an ambitious one. So let me go back to Gonzalo. You mentioned that there is a lot going on around the globe that you have seen. Can you highlight some of the actions, or especially collective actions, that you have observed that you think that can make a change?
Yeah, sure. So definitely we first acknowledge day after day more and more that non-party stakeholders have a very fundamental role in taking real world action to reduce emissions. And that is something that unfortunately was not that clear maybe 5 years ago. Now we have it more and more clear. So what we've done with Nigel, we've set the Race to Zero campaign to bring all of the non-party stakeholders, meaning businesses, investors, cities, regions, universities. We're now hopefully ready to launch one other category with sports initiatives, and maybe in the future schools. So every single organization represented in the non-party stakeholders should be part of the commitments that are required for the countries to see how much of the action is happening and is helpful for them to increment and enhance their NDC, increment their ambition through the enhancement of the NDC. So if we just take the Race to Zero as part of the General Climate Ambition Alliance will include parties and non-party stakeholders. When it comes to Race to Zero, it's just about the non-party stakeholders that is demonstrating the scale of commitments to decarbonization. Increasingly, we're seeing sector collaboration across the value chain in all the world to develop decarbonization pathways and implement emission reduction solutions. That is happening even this year. So those solutions should help to activate what is called the ambition loop. It's about parties having signed the Paris Agreement, setting this general goal, then it comes to us, the non-party stakeholders, to start implementing, to start doing the action that is required. Through that, while increasing those commitments, we're sending the message for the parties to feel confident and enhance their NDCs. But at the same time, in this critical year, we're sending an extra message. That is, we can and we should recover better from COVID with the implementation of those activities that really are capable of mobilizing the economies and creating jobs in a very short time, but at the same time, reduce the local emissions and reduce the climate crisis. So we are seeing that is really happening in this moment. For example, when you aggregate all of the commitments on the Climate Ambition Alliance, it's more than 53% of the global GDP. You have more than 1/3 of the global population already committed to a net zero and resilient world. This is happening now. There's so much that should and will happen towards COP26.
Thank you, Gonzalo, very much. And this morning we actually had a youth input into Innovation Week, and it is really absolutely fundamental that we have this broad coalition to move the climate action forward. And you rightly mentioned the COVID crisis, which really kind of reshaped everything, and not just moved the dates for the COP, but also reshaped everything we know. And so I'm going to ask Kat now. You reflected a little bit on some of the challenges in these really complicated sectors, but also that there are several opportunities emerging from this situation. So can you speak from the government perspective? How do you see these?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to build on the enthusiasm from Gonzalo as well. On there is enormous opportunity, and I think COVID and the response has given us time to pause and reflect on how do we build a global, green, resilient recovery coming out of that's fair and inclusive as well. And I think that is the focus, for our COP presidency is a green and resilient recovery. And our Prime Minister has really talked about that a lot in the UN and the broader speaking. I think that for us, I spoke a little bit about there's some opportunities here. And how can we lead by example? The UK is trying to do its bit around net zero. But I think the key for us is we're committed to working with countries, civil societies, and the private sector to inspire action ahead of COP26. And crucially, what we're asking for is parties to come together, reach a negotiated outcome that accelerates climate action. And particularly there, Gonzalo's already talked about it, all countries coming forward with ambitious 2030 climate plans, NDCs, and long-term strategies to reach zero carbon emissions as soon as possible. But I think the key for this too is not just about net zero, but it's also adapting to climate change, particularly the vulnerable. And this is a key focus for us as well. And we're talking about a fair and inclusive presidency to bring governments, business, and civil society together. And along those themes, I think there's real opportunity. So around adaptation and resilience, what we're trying to do is working with other countries to ensure communities and countries can adapt to the worst effects of climate change by stepping up access to funding and expertise around resilience. In nature, this is a big focus around protecting and restoring natural habitats. But also, as we look to the post-COVID and recovery, there is a lot of jobs in the agri sector. What can we do to promote that and make that sustainable? In terms of energy, we've touched on this already, but there's a real opportunity to accelerate the transition to a clean energy future. Renewables in many parts of the world are cheaper than the incumbent. Let's embrace those benefits of cheaper renewable electricity, battery storage, and the opportunities that they provide. As we have recovery plans by country, how can we make them renewable plans? How can we make them net zero recovery plans? And we've seen this already being adopted by many countries. Not only with China's announcement, but India. I know many countries in Latin America are thinking about this as well. And then transport, there are multiple benefits of having the global transition to zero emission vehicles. Not only is it good for the planet, is it good for creating a whole new industry, but also cleaning up the air we breathe in the cities. And finally, I just think we so often talk about finance in these debates, but finance is the thing to unlock. And so the UK is committed to increasing its climate finance as part of this. We're calling on other countries to do the same, but also private sector finance is key. So how can we get private sector finance to really see this as the norm? And we're certainly seeing that with some of the work that Mark Carney and others are doing through the Task Force on Financial Disclosures. So, we want to work in partnership. There's some enormous opportunities, and how can we grab them in the next 12 months? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Let me stay with you for this round of questions. You're talking about it is an enormous opportunity. It's a long-term strategy. When Arena looked at the COVID situation, and we were trying to sort of look at what is this long-term strategy that we have to have, and how we zoom in on this very critical period of the recovery. It becomes a little bit more crystallized. What are the priorities for the short term to kind of make that shift for the long-term strategy? So you have this opportunity as co-president, incoming presidency, to really use these next 12 months to shape some of these responses and actions around the climate space. I mean, we work with you, Arena works with you closely on the energy transitions campaign and other areas. So can you talk us a little bit through what your plans are for the next 12 months?
Yeah. So it's around really those 5 themes I was discussing. So the key is, I really take my lead from Chile here. How do we raise ambition? Through nationally determined contributions. So each country looks at their NDCs and say, we really need to close that gap from 2.5 to 1.5 degrees. What can we do? But within that context, there's an opportunity in key theme areas to strengthen NDCs. And we're trying to form partnerships with public and private sector, with industry around these areas. And those 5 areas really are adaptation and resilience. So the UK supports some programs now looking at disaster mapping and can we, if you've got a weather event, how do you respond to that? And so there's a whole group of countries coming together around that. On the nature side, at the moment, only 3% of public finance goes towards nature and forestry and halting deforestation, and yet it's 25% of the potential solution. So what can we do to increase finance to halt deforestation and encourage sustainable agriculture in key parts of the world where we know we're losing, biodiversity? So things like in Latin America, in Indonesia, in the Congo Basin, they're such important areas to preserve. And what can we do to create markets to help preserve those? The third area is on energy, and it's really accelerating the coal transition and phase out. So the UK has committed to coal phase out. We now have many countries involved in the Powering Past Coal Alliance. Coal phase out, but increasing renewables and the opportunities there. And so really working with countries around that. And we're very excited about hydrogen and CCUS and the potential of those technologies. So really welcome the collaborations with Japan, Australia, Germany, US and others that are putting money and investing in bringing the cost of these technologies down to make them competitive. Transport, we've talked a little bit around here, but the global transition to net zero. So countries saying we are also going to commit to net zero and creating, I think there's a real opportunity there. The car of the future, the next car you buy, will it be an electric car? I think so. So, it's how do we do that shift in the next decade? And the final thing I think is finance. There's under the Paris Agreement, there's 100 billion climate finance commitment. We not only need to hit that, but think about how do you finance NDCs going forward, and where's that opportunity to do that? And I think that's not just public sector, that's got to be private sector as well. So overarching, higher ambition, but what are the things by sector that we can do to help support that ambition?
Thank you so very much. And I think for the last round, I want to ask Gonzalo, you've been on this for like 2 years now. So what would be your advice on how to maintain this momentum, how to get more stakeholders, how to get this critical mass to actually advance climate action?
Well, happy to build on what Catherine just mentioned in terms of things that are already happening and represents a unique and so clear opportunity. But let me first say that having a climate declaration is no longer a nice to have. For many years, we thought it was like a nice to have. It's no longer that. Science is a non-negotiable. So in that sense, for anybody in the world not following science, not committing to a net zero and resilient world by 2050, the latest, is declaring that you feel comfortable of being part of the problem. I cannot imagine somebody waking up every day and saying, I'm happy to be part of the problem that is destroying livelihoods all around the world. So imagining that you want to be part of the solution, that you understand science and you know how the world should look like by 2050, then pledge to join the Race to Zero campaign. Joining this race will help you demonstrate your commitment to this net zero world, plan your actions, proceed to deliver, and start publishing all what you're doing. Those are the 4 Ps: pledge, plan, proceed, and publish. You can find a lot of that around the criteria and how to proceed in terms of the commitment by searching UNFCCC Race to Zero in your browser. But when it comes to business sector, the business sector have mostly 6 entry points, one of them being the 1.5 business pledge of the UN Global Compact. You can do it also through the climate pledge. You can do it through the B Corp commitments. There are several now. We have just launched the SME Climate Hub with the International Chamber of Commerce for having also all SMEs from around the world. So when it comes to a big company, that will require also their value chain, their providers to also get committed. When it comes to investors, as Catherine said, it's absolutely a fundamental part of the equation. They can join through the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance. When it comes to subnational governments, when it comes to cities, can join science-based targets for cities at ICTE. For all of them, as I said, we have for universities, we have for major regions. Now we're developing one for sports. When it comes to also companies can join the Renewable Energy 100, the RE100, and so commit to using 100% renewable energy. That's something that has been there for so long, and it's being massively used from all around the world. And it's a very concrete way to commit. We need those concrete actions and on different sectors, but freight needs to support the shift to zero, and we know that, and that it's also being delivered through the technology that is that's being deployed at least week by week. We definitely invite you to join our partners alliances that we support to accelerate the zero emission freight technologies, and in particularly, let me recommend 2 of them. One is the WEF Roads Freight Zero and the Transport Decabonisation Alliance, working also with key companies towards zero emission freight options. Finally, of course, let's seize the opportunity at COP26. Road transportation is one of the top 5 sectorial priorities, and there will be high-level events in run-up to a zero accelerate to accelerate the adoption of zero-emission vehicles, cars, vans, and possibly trucks. This is an invitation to join us as part of this campaign, connected to the need of having a sector of energy that is mobilizing in a fast way in order to transform our world to a net zero and resilient world. We need you all on board. You have to understand how important is the message that you send to the world by committing. It's not only about what you do, it's about how that is being perceived by the parties and by all the citizens from all around the world.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo, and Irina is very happy to be hosting the Race to Zero Energy Day on the 16th. So we're going to reconnect again in a few weeks. We came to the end of our session, and I want to thank you very much for your contribution. You have a big responsibility on your shoulders, and but it was also very inspiring to see that you have a clarity of your agendas and a commitment to gather all the stakeholders to support you. And on behalf of Irina, I can commit that we're going to stay with you in the Race to Zero. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and thank you, Irina.
Thank you.
Well, very many thanks, Elizabeth, and huge thanks to Gonzalo and Kath. It was really inspiring, really encouraging to hear the potential you see and to hear about the plans that you're pursuing. We all very much hope that the insights from our work and those we gain from events such as this week's can support that agenda, and we need to find ways to do so. So, we've spoken a lot about technology-driven innovation this week, but action on technology alone is not sufficient. We need a supportive policy environment to scale the uptake of these solutions. And that's what our next panel is going to discuss. We're really pleased to have a distinguished group of public and private sector representatives to explore this topic. Let me hand you over, therefore, to Rabia Faruqi, IRENA's Director of Knowledge, Policy and Finance, who's going to provide a short introductory presentation, and then she'll introduce her panel and lead us into the discussion. Rabia, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here and lead the discussion on the policy framework and the enabling conditions for the energy transition. As Paul was mentioning, in the past 4 days, we have had very interesting discussions about technology, the innovative solutions to advance the energy transition, which of course are all crucial for achieving climate goals. But we also know that technology and innovative solutions should go hand in hand with policy and the socioeconomic structures that the transition relies upon. So it's with great pleasure that we're going to be discussing in this roundtable some of these dimensions, and allow me to very briefly give a scene setter to highlight some of the systems approach that is required for this energy transition. So, as we all know, policies supporting renewables have so far primarily focused on power generation, and efforts in heating, cooling, and transport have really lagged behind. Now, we've witnessed, as a result, great progress in the power sector, supported by policies over many years. But because thermal uses account for half of total energy consumption and transport for another third, and they heavily rely on fossil fuel, the next generation of policy really needs to focus on advancing the transition in these sectors. So, and of course, also in supporting the increased shares of variable renewable energy in power, given their fundamental role in electrification and sector coupling. So, IRENA's transforming energy scenario clearly shows that electricity will account for almost half of the energy consumption, and that's mainly based on renewable energy power. And this is to power various end uses, including heat pumps, electric vehicles, electrolysis, industrial processes, etc. This means that the policy frameworks now need to take a systems approach with more fully integrated policies across sectors, taking advantage of synergies with energy efficiency, with electrification, and e-fuels. Now, IRENA has highlighted the need for this integrated or systems approach to policy making throughout its work. And in 2018, we partnered with the IEA and REN21 in a joint publication to show the system approach. Building on this work, we partnered again to analyze the policies that are needed to transition heating and cooling. And we focus on 6 pathways and the policies needed to address all these institutional, technical, financial barriers and accelerate the uptake of renewables in these sectors. Now, some policies are cut across all the pathways, for example, setting targets specific to heating and cooling, removing fossil fuel subsidies, diverting private investment towards enabling infrastructure, and of course, mobilizing private investment. Other policies are more specific to each transformation pathway, and we will launch this work in a few weeks during IRENA's 6th Policy Day. I will very briefly present the pathways for three of them: sustainable energy, electrification and sector coupling, and green hydrogen, and the enabling framework that is required. So for sustainable bioenergy, for an example, we all know that bioenergy will play a significant role in decarbonization for hard to abate energy uses. And there are multiple barriers, though, that stand in the path of further development, such as high costs, lack of access to finance, as well as regulation and simply awareness raising. So in the work IRENA is carrying out right now, we're highlighting how governments can integrate bioenergy in the energy system planning, improve the value chain, mobilize investment, and take a more holistic approach to maximize the synergies with agriculture, forestry, waste management across the whole bioenergy industry. Now, as the cost of variable renewable energy has fallen, occupying a larger and larger share of power generation, electrification has obviously become the privileged path for decarbonization of end users. So IRENA is currently analyzing the policy-related aspect linked to financial support, power market restructuring, tariff redesign, upgrade of infrastructure, minimum performance standards, etc., in order to facilitate further the electrification of end users. And obviously, green hydrogen is also getting more and more attention since it offers the opportunity for variable renewable energy to reach the hard-to-abate sectors. So in fact, the technological maturity and the low VRE costs are making green hydrogen economically attractive. So there's growing interest that comes from a variety of actors and a variety of possible applications. So there's also a wide commitment for net zero, as we just saw in the previous session, resulting in governments increasing their role in the sector. Many countries, as you can see on the slide, have been taking actions over the past 2 years with dedicated strategies and policies, also driven by potential trade growth and projects for technological leadership. So all these elements have sort of created the necessary ecosystem required to channel investments. And IRENA is currently analyzing green hydrogen policies to assist decision-making in the sector. And we do that around 4 policy pillars. First is preparing the national strategy to provide a common reference that can guide efforts from all the different stakeholders I mentioned. The second pillar is around a governance system that can support hydrogen and the enabling policies that are targeting system-wide barriers. This includes setting up research agenda, but also availability of a domestic workforce, preventing the unfair advantage for fossil fuels through subsidies and so on. The third pillar is the guarantee of origins scheme to differentiate green hydrogen from other carbon-intensive hydrogen. And the last pillar is around establishing priorities to focus the efforts on end users that can bring faster and larger carbon reduction. Sorry. So again, in the past 4 days, we saw the need for a systems approach at the technological level. This is one layer of the transition. I just very briefly introduced another layer of the system approach for the deployment of policies that are required to support the transition of the energy system. But we all know that the transition involves many systemic layers, and a systems approach will require also addressing the interactions between all these layers of the transition and the dynamics between them. This means looking at energy, at the economy, at society, and the environmental system. So progress towards a just and fair transition will require addressing fundamental systemic changes that are needed in our socioeconomic structure upon which this transition relies. And I think COVID only unveiled the fragility of our socioeconomic system. So this means that the appropriate industrial skills, labor, social and financial policies must be formulated from a holistic point of view to support the transition. And only then can we ensure that the millions of jobs, the economic development and health benefits that the transition promises to societies around the world will take place. So thank you very much for the opportunity to give you a bit of a scene setter. And to move faster and with a systemic approach in mind, I'm really delighted to welcome experts coming from very different backgrounds, as Paul mentioned, from the private and the public sector, but also from different industries. And I asked them to please turn on their camera now. And they will tell us about their perspective on the challenges ahead and the actions needed to achieve decarbonization in these sectors. So I would like to first welcome our first distinguished panelist, Mr. Young Tai Kim. He's the Secretary General of the International Transport Forum. Mr. Young, thank you very much for joining us. As highlighted throughout the past few days, there is a great focus in energy discussion on decarbonizing transport. And so it's very important for us to have a representative from the sector today. Thank you again. Just very briefly, the transport sector is not only huge, but it also consists of so many different subsectors and so many stakeholders. So not all of them are involved in the energy transition dialogue, which means that there is a risk of losing their perspective or contribution to the strategy for transforming the sector. From your perspective, how do you see the roles of institutions in the transport sector?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me today. And I really want to congratulate ARENA for its success of this Innovation Week. And I'm very happy to participate in this very interesting event. But as you mentioned, so far, transport sector focused more on transport itself, and also more specifically speaking, transport sector focused on the aspects of a transport. So when you talk about transport, you can easily imagine the cars and train, ship, airplane. But in fact, these days we are facing more complicated reality in the sense that transport question is directly or indirectly connected to the questions of other areas. So frankly speaking, when I was working in the Ministry of Transport in Korea, and I was kind of in a silo, and I was an expert on transport, so-called transport, but I was not really interested in energy issues or any other issues at the time. But I think it's a general phenomenon everywhere in this world. And if you, for example, take an example of every developing countries or underdeveloped countries, even in one government, there are people who have different views and different approaches and different priorities. And in that sense, it's really important for international organizations like ARENA and ITF to coordinate different sectors like we are doing today. And decarbonization is definitely a very important issue. We all agree on that. But how we can achieve our goal is a question and the challenge. So basically, if we only think about transport, I can say that we cannot really find a solution of the even transport questions. And we have to know the other areas. We have to know about digitalization. We have to know about even gender issues and social issues and environmental issues. And as a crisis is opportunity, recently we felt that we could really achieve a good environment through the COVID-19 period, because we might have known it theoretically, but through this period, we really felt it. Every day, we felt fresh air and cleaner air. And our dream was not really a dream itself. We could make it come true. And maybe we can get a lesson from this crisis together. And as you mentioned, we need to focus more on a cross-sectoral approach. And since last year, I had 2 meetings with Mr. La Camera and about our future collaboration, and that's already great thing to share. And on our side, so far, we since COP21 Paris Agreement, we accelerated our activities on this topic, and we became a partner of part of the Marrakesh Partnership, and also we played a role of transport focal point for UNFCCC. And more recently in July this year, during this difficult period, we finally launched TCAD, that is a Transport Climate Action Directory that contains more than 60 measures that government can use. Because in reality, we were a little bit the normative and ideological in the sense that we should do this and do that. But how we can convince people, it was a challenge. So there are so many measures that government can use, but when we bring it to the table for discussion with the Ministry of Finance or Congress people, and we could not really provide the quantifiable impact of every measure the government could use. But now it's a living document, but nevertheless, at least we can say that more than 60 measures that government can use have this kind of quantifiable impact. So this is a good reference for transport people, but also for environment people. And this was officially endorsed by the UNFCCC. So I think this kind of reference and document can be useful for many policymakers in the future. So we continue with that approach. And I know that there is no magic lamp of Aladdin that can bring a definite solution tomorrow, certainly. So we have to take our time, and we have to do a step-by-step approach. And I think, I hope that the platform of ITF can be efficiently connected to other platforms like IRENA. And in this sense, I hope that our cooperation will continue to produce a lot of fruits for all the communities in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Young. I couldn't agree more with you in terms of those silos that we have all been working in, and the need to connect all systems and partnerships. So we're very pleased to have this relationship with you. I just want, because you mentioned COVID very briefly, I just wanted to know whether obviously through the pandemic we saw how everything was stopped in terms of traveling, etc. And I wanted to just know, and it has obviously affected a lot of livelihoods and people. And I would just wanted to know very briefly whether you have measured this impact yourself in the country.
I know that we are still suffering from this shocking the event that we never expected. But if we think differently, because of this, we could see more than we did. So there already existed so many things in our life, but some things were invisible and some things were ignored. But now we might be able to have more balanced approach and thinking about new things, maybe thinking about the old things with a new vision and new approach. For example, we very much value the public transport system, but during this COVID-19, a lot of people were scared about using public transport system because of the propagation of the virus. So even some governments encourage people to use private cars rather than the public transport system. So that's one example, because we usually thought that transport should be clean, but it's not enough. Now we can say that it should go beyond clean. So we should be safely sanitary, I would say. And also we learned that our daily life using transport devices is really important, but it was a little bit taken for granted for a long time. But now transport sector is becoming a really important factor to consider even for non-transport communities, and that justifies the further cooperation between the transport sector and the other sectors. So those are several examples, but people already have a concrete feeling compared to the previous years.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we all became a lot more aware of how important transport is, and as a result, what we need to do in order to make sure that this is clean. Thank you very much. I will now turn to Mr. Michael Hacketal, who is the head of the Division of General Issues of International Energy Cooperation, Multilateral Energy Cooperation at BMWI in Germany. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. Michael, Germany is leading the EU presidency, and like other EU countries, it aims to become carbon neutral by 2050. And you have set the preliminary targets of cutting emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990. So I would like to ask you how these targets are reflected in the industry and transport, and if you could give us some insight on the German policy for decarbonization of these sectors. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, hello, Rabia. Thanks for having me, and hello, everybody. And congratulations to the excellent Innovation Week you've been organizing. I think that's been really impressive. So for your question, as for other countries, I think it's been the same in Germany, that for a long time electricity, the power sector, has been the focus of our attention in deploying renewables and so on. And this awareness that we need to go beyond that has been growing now for a couple of years. And I would say the first step that we took, and that has been really important, was to actually come to an agreement in the federal government, which share sectors like transport and industry will need to contribute to reach our decarbonization aims, well, first mid-range until 2030. And that is something we achieved in 2016 as part of our climate protection strategy, actually until 2050. But this, for the first time, included sector targets, including for industry and transport until 2030. I won't bore you with the exact numbers, and still the reduction numbers in the power sector are higher, but to cut it short, in the industry sector, we want to halve emissions compared to 1990 till 2030, and in transport to decrease by more than 40%. Now, the second thing I would like to stress, and that already Mr. Young also talked about, which I think is vital in order to make sure we reach these aims, is to make sure we have, beyond the individual policy measures, which I probably don't have the time now to all detail, but it's really important to have a proper institutional setup, also in the public sector, in the government, to make sure we can deliver on these aims, which in Germany meant that we created a so-called climate cabinet, bringing all the ministries together that have a role to play in meeting our decarbonization targets. And well, the first product of the climate cabinet was this climate protection program until 2050 in 2016, but it didn't end its work then, and it's still meeting regularly in order to make sure that we stay on track in moving towards these aims. And actually, so meaning it's a monitoring mechanism, and it's also an institution that takes action when there's awareness that we go off track, which actually there was some apprehension about some time ago. So at the end of last year, in the face of, well, that was before COVID, we were nervous that we would not meet our 2020 aims, and also that we are not really going fast enough towards our 2030 aims, especially in the transport sector. So the climate cabinet and the federal government as a whole came up with an additional action program mid-range until 2030 with a broad variety of measures, a lot in the transport sector, EV charging infrastructure, purchase premiums on EV cars, but also beyond electric mobility, mandatory blending of biofuels, and so on and so on, to make sure we really move at the proper pace towards the aims set. Now, I think already my first time is up, so if there are any questions, I'll be happy to go into details on the specific policy measures. Perhaps two things very briefly. Once I was already talking about the 2030 action program. The one big measure that's really at the heart of the logic of the program is that we introduced a national emissions trading system for those sectors not yet covered by the European trading system, meaning also for the transport sector, and that will kick in starting the beginning of next year. And beyond that, it's really a mix, as in our whole energy policy, of setting regulatory frameworks that set standards and provide a predictable roadmap how these standards will develop. So all actors have a good, stable basis for their planning and their individual decisions. And beyond that, focused incentive programs in order to encourage companies, citizens, and so on to take extra action on moving forward. So I leave it at that for the moment.
Thank you so much, Michael. I mean, I think you have all the pieces of the puzzle between the targets, the monitoring, the specific sector targets, the regulations, the institutional setup that you spoke about, different standards, etc. I was just wondering whether in this mix of policy there is also specific regulations regarding the workforce that is required to accompany, let's say, this energy transition. Very briefly, if you can. Thank you.
Very interesting question. We've always taken pride in Germany, if I may say, in our dual system of professional education, in order to make sure that we have the qualified workforce really at all levels to move not only the energy transition forward, but it's really vital in this sector where we need a lot of new qualifications. And we're also looking at questions like like gender issues. Again, Germany is probably not alone in that. We do have a challenge in encouraging girls, women to enter these sectors. That's probably something still to work on, also within the general federal government, because again, the education system is not within our ministry here. Yes, there are initiatives to encourage girls, women, but I think we do have some way to go there, to be frank. Yes.
Thank you so much. I'll get back to you later if we have a minute on green hydrogen, if you don't mind. Right now, I'm gonna go to Amanda Wilson. Miss Amanda Wilson is the Director General of the Office of Energy Research and development of at Natural Resource Canada. We're delighted to have you with us today. We have seen over the recent past that Canada has made a number of announcements to strengthen the policy to support climate change, and you've had measures to reduce emissions further, introduce new ones, and exceed the 2030 emission reduction goal. So, and you also you're developing or will develop a plan to achieve net zero emission by 2050 and make it basically set legal binding 5-year emission reduction milestones. So how do you see these policies and innovation working together to help to decarbonize hard to abate sectors like industry and transport?
Sure. So thanks for having me. Are you able to hear me okay? Okay, great. So thanks very much. I think that first of all, the fact that we're having this discussion shows that there really is an increasing recognition across jurisdictions and among those who work in energy innovation that while technological advancements and innovation are always going to be at the core of what we do in that space, that we need to apply the concept of innovation much more broadly and make sure that there are enabling policies and regulations and standards. These are key if we're really going to move the needle and accelerate innovation to the extent that we know we're going to need to meet these goals that not just Canada has, but I know many IRENA member countries share. So, you know, in industry and transportation in particular, as many people have said, I'm sure through the week, we know that, you know, this isn't going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be pretty hard. And we know that the IEA recently in its ETP report, the Energy Technology Perspectives report, there was a big stat there, I think, that really stuck out for us where I work, and that's that only 1/4 of the technologies that we'll need for net zero are at a mature state of readiness. So, I mean, this really does underscore the importance of innovation. And I think a corollary of that is the fact that we know that innovation is not going to happen on its own. You know, as we've been saying, it needs to be supported by strong policies. So really that we're incenting industry to invest in cleaner solutions, you know, including renewables, including clean fuels. And this, of course, means helping to create the market conditions that will, you know, help pull technologies through to broader deployment. In Canada, these types of enabling policies are especially needed because, you know, we're blessed, I guess, to have many forms of energy that are abundant and that are extremely affordable. So as you noted, the Canadian government has introduced or is in the process of developing a real range of policy mechanisms to help accelerate that energy transition. So as you noted, we've implemented a price on carbon, and we're in the process of developing a clean fuel standard, which will really be an important regulatory tool in terms of advancing low carbon fuels across really all of the sectors of Canadian economy. The clean fuel standard in particular, for those of you who are, is expected to reduce about 30 megatons of GHG emissions annually by 2030. And it really has been designed to drive innovation and clean growth and the adoption of clean technologies. And then for Canada in particular, in terms of decarbonization of the transportation sector, you know, we really do see this as key to achieving our net zero target by 2050. And in fact, Canada is pretty steadfast in its commitment to have 100% of sales of new light duty vehicles being zero emission by 2040. So to make this happen, as you can imagine, we really need to use the full range of tools in our toolbox, providing, you know, significant investments in things like zero emission vehicle infrastructure, providing purchase incentives to Canadians, and making ZEVs more affordable for businesses as well. And then really maybe taking a step back again and just sort of talking about how Canada really is committed to this full range of policy measures. In we have this thing in Canada, as other Westminster jurisdictions do, called Speech from the Throne, which is really where the government lays out its priorities and its mandate, for the near to medium term. And so this happened a couple of weeks ago in Canada, and the government reaffirmed, commitment to making zero emission vehicles more affordable and to investing in more charging stations. As you referenced in your question, doubled down on the plan to bring forward, immediately a plan to exceed the 2030 goal and to legislate net zero emissions by 2050. And also, as a first sort of step and down payment toward these things, announced $2.5 billion in funding to support sort of building back better in light of the pandemic by investing in new clean power infrastructure. So I think there we're really seeing how you can leverage this notion of a green recovery with investments in innovation and in the technologies that will be needed to move to net zero. So in terms of what that means, to get down to some nitty gritty in terms of what it means for us in Canada, like what do we have to do in industry and transport to get to net zero by 2050? For us, we're lucky that one of our low-hanging fruits is electrification. So as many of you may already be aware, Canada is blessed with significant renewable energy resources, and our grid is already 82% clean and non-emitting. And the investments that I referenced in terms of a clean power program are really geared at decarbonizing that even further. And so other complementary measures include things like our electric vehicle infrastructure demonstration program to help electrify transport. And in the course of that program, which is run out of my shop at Natural Resources Canada, we have things like one of our projects is a pan-Canadian electric bus demonstration and integration trial, which is really looking at addressing gaps and understanding interoperability of different electric bus models with overhead chargers, doing things like providing real world data to utilities and transit agencies to help inform the choices that they're making. And it will also help inform both domestic and international codes and standards and regulations. Another project that we have in that program is with Sky Solar Canada, and it's looking at integrating EV charging stations with solar PV and battery storage. And, we're really happy that some of the early results of that project are showing us that EVs really do have a potential to help balance the local grid or be used as emergency backup power. So things like that we're following sort of really, really closely, and we're doing what we can to translate the learnings from those types of projects back into the policy development phase. Maybe another point I will make very quickly is just about complementary technologies. So that's things like, innovations in smart grids and batteries, which, as you all would know well, really are the key enablers of industry and transport decarbonization through electrification. So to help advance those technologies, we have things, programs within my shop, like our Charging the Future Challenge, which is really looking at accelerating the most promising Canadian battery innovations from the lab toward the market. We also have a Smart Grid program, which has a demonstration component, which is really, maybe one of the first examples that we have of an adopter-focused program. So we're funding Canadian utilities to demonstrate new smart grid technologies that will help, do a number of things, but it will help include or help increase penetration of renewable generation, and it will support the electrification of end uses. So,
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a question? Yeah, sure. I'll wrap up pretty quickly here. So maybe I'll spend just a quick moment on apart from electrification, you know, we have to look in terms of the harder to electrify subsectors, you know, like long distance transport, like high temperature heat, and it's in these places that, you know, we're really putting a premium on low carbon fuels and the potential that they hold for us in Canada. So you know, we think that about 60% of our economy could actually be powered by low carbon fuels. Today, we're at about 6%, so it's a tenfold increase. So we're working on things like the development of a Canadian hydrogen strategy, and also on seeing how what the opportunities are to pair CCUS technologies with decabonisation of hard to abate sectors. So I'll stop there. I know I ran a little bit over my time, and apologies for that, but I hope it's helped give you a sense of how you know, we really do see the policy environment and our D&D funding programs as complementary, and you know, we think that going forward, a missions-oriented or outcome-focused approach is really what gives us the best chance of hitting our climate goals. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. A lot of examples of R&D and demonstration projects can support the transition, the energy transition in these hard-to-abate sectors. And some nice examples that go along also with Michael's intervention in terms of specific targets and specific support provided for some of this. In the interest of time, I'm going to move from Canada to Sweden, another country that has a plan to achieve net zero emission by 2050 already. Joining us today is Mr. Ola Göransson, Deputy Director at the Ministry of Environment and Energy in Sweden. And as we all know, Sweden has already a target of 100% renewables by 2040 and plans to become net zero by 2045. So Ola, can you tell us more about those ambitious targets we all look up to? How do they relate to transport and industry? And maybe just elaborate a bit on the policies to achieve those targets. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rabia, and thanks for a really interesting and important event, and also so interesting to hear the previous speakers, and really a lot of the experience we have in Sweden I hear echoed in the comments from them, including the need to break through the silos, the importance of working with institutions for achieving the change, and the range of different policy options that are needed that Amanda just described. So yes, we do have ambitious targets in Sweden, and I think I can make a couple of points about them. First of all, I think it's important for us that they have not been set in a vacuum. These targets. We have the vision of becoming a fossil-free welfare society. We want to be net zero emissions at latest 2045, and as you said, we want to have 100% renewable electricity by 2040 at the latest. We also have a target for a transport sector minus 70% by 2030 and so forth. But I think what is important is that when setting this target, it's not been sort of just a top-down approach. It's been really engaging between the political parties with the different constituents, having a long process of engaging with the actors that are affected by this to try and see, is this feasible? Is this possible? Does it relate to science? So there has been a large inquiry looking at this, discussions between parties. I think that was the foundation for really having setting this target and feeling that it is possible to achieve it, and having, which is I think not unique, but it's quite good to have all buy-in from all political parties but one that say that yes, we stand behind this goal. So this is something that we want to achieve. And it's been a sort of a joint learning experience to set the targets. I think that's one important starting point. And the second point, I think, is important to have this. I mean, what we want to achieve is the vision to have, but this is going to be the basis for our long-term welfare, for long-term competitiveness. So this is something we want to share between the different, between government and between industry. This vision that this is possible, and competitiveness and decreasing carbon emissions can actually go hand in hand, and that's something that is more and more shared by the different actors in society. So I think that's an important sort of basis for policy setting. And to speak a little bit more about the policy framework, I can reflect a lot what Michael said from Germany, that we worked a lot with creating sort of the institutions for this. We have a climate law that regulates how government should do business. We have then developed a comprehensive climate action plan. And there's a climate policy council that follows up on if the government delivers. And what's very important in this, and something that is stipulated also in the law, is that this should be integrated in all policy areas. And most important perhaps, that the budget issues and the climate issues go hand in hand. And this is something you have to be working very hard with within government, because as many experience, it is hard to get different ministries to work with each other, and it is hard for the environment ministry to drive this. So also in Sweden, we have now instituted a climate cabinet with the prime minister and the most important ministers that are joined together to collectively make sure that the climate action plan is actually implemented, and to make sure that we have the integration across the different policy sectors. And then, of course, we have a range of very concrete policies to help deliver on this. I mean, we have had since the 90s a carbon tax, which is an important base. So now it's I think the highest, globally highest tax on more than 100 euro per ton of carbon. So we have a basis of policy, general policy instruments, and then we have specific instruments. For example, we instituted for talking specifically about the hard-to-abate sectors and the process industries. We have instituted a long-term support for innovation, research, and development and demonstration going up to 2040, giving some security to these industries that they will get support from the government to help innovate and develop the new processes that are needed to tackle emissions from steel, cement, and so forth. For the transport sector, we have a range of issues. We have a quota system for biofuels in the fuels now with steps up to 2030 to make sure that there is a substantive change of fuels in the transport sector. We have support for charging infrastructure, a number of instruments, and also in another way. I mean, it's important for example, take the transport sector. It's very important to not only to look at the transport per se, but how can we create a society that is more efficient and that fulfills the goals that we have, without perhaps necessarily only transporting things back and forth. So that goes to urban planning and a lot of different things. And one starting point there is that when you have the policy target for the Swedish transport policy, we have now been able to sort of make sure that the overarching target for the transport sector is set within the need to be zero emissions by 2045, and that's a very important starting point, so that all actors know that, well, when we think about how to develop the transport system, that has to be done within the overarching climate target, and I think that's very important. And lastly, I would like to add that apart from these different these institutions and the policies and so forth, and sort of relating back to what I started with, the vision, the joint vision that we want to be a welfare society. We think that this can go hand in hand with the profitability and competitiveness and so forth. I think that engaging with the civil society and with the industry sector is fundamental if you're going to deliver on this. So therefore, I think the cooperation with industry, and specifically in the transport and hard-to-abate sectors, is extremely important. And we have, when we set our national target for 2045, we realized that we can't make this on our own. So we set up sort of a way of engaging with these industry actors, and in a voluntary way ask them how can we work with each other to deliver on these targets, and that has been quite successful cooperation in Sweden, and the industry has really responded and have so voluntarily developed their own roadmaps for how they can become fossil free, and of course also then stating what they need from the government to achieve this. So by now more than 20 roadmaps have been drawn up by different industry branches describing their way to become fossil free. And now, of course, we as a government will have to work with the demands from these roadmaps, and they will have to start delivering on how to make sure that the plans are actually put to practice, etc. But I think that so different forms of cooperation between the public and the private sectors to jointly address this issue, I think that's a fundamental part of the answer to the challenge we have at hand. So thanks. I think I'll stop by that.
So much, Ola. Very interesting. I think it mirrors a little bit also what Michael was saying about the cross-sectoral, but also the specific targets, the different regulations going beyond just the energy sector, the institutional capacity that is required, and of course also the needed cooperation between the different ministries in order to achieve that. And of course, having civil society on board. If I had more time, I would ask you the same question as Michael, is whether also the educational and training and so basically the preparation of the labor force is part of that, but I presume it is like in Germany. But maybe we can have that discussion some other time. I have to turn, thank you so much, Ola. I have to turn, I will turn now to India with Ms. Soma Banerjee. Executive Director of the Confederation, of Indian Industry. Thank you so much for being with us today. You're going to be speaking about the private sector. We know the private sector, as just mentioned by Ola, cooperation with industry is very important. So in this energy transition, not only for providing solutions for technologies, but also by decarbonizing their own energy uses. So I wanted to ask you, what is the role of private institution in decarbonizing the energy sector in India, in particular in the hard to decarbonize industry? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to really share with you the views of the private sector. As you have rightly mentioned, I come from the Confederation of Indian Industry, which is an industry association. You know, India is at a very interesting point, if I may say so. It was interesting to hear my co-panelists who have more or less shared experiences of countries which have already marched ahead with their decarbonization process. And I'm very intrigued to know from them how they have done many of the things which we are confronted with at the moment. To just give you a quick glimpse of where we are, the current energy mix in India, we have about 62% thermal, hydel of 12%, nuclear at a small 1.8%, and renewable at 24%. It's interesting that we are talking of renewable at 24%. And it's actually almost galloped over the last 6 years. If you look at the BP Energy Outlook, it says that India would become the largest source of energy, the largest source of energy for India would be renewable energy by 2050. Therefore, it shows, and it also says that it's perhaps only natural gas which will show a positive increase, apart from the other fossil fuels like coal or anything else. As we know that India has already committed to a global climate change commitment to reduce its emissions to the intensity of GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030 to its 2005 levels. Now, this clearly, I think, completely lays down that the roadmap or the transition as far as energy is concerned in India. The first thing is that we've taken a huge target, a very ambitious target, I would say, of achieving 40% of installed capacity based on renewable sources by 2030. Now here, I think the biggest challenge, I will speak of the challenges as we speak of the transition, is how are we going to crack the energy storage puzzle? Because to reach that 40% of installed capacity of renewable, we need a very strong and affordable energy storage solution, which at the moment at least is not there in the horizon as far as we are concerned. And I'm saying as far as we are concerned because for India, the affordability and accessibility of a solution is very, very important and key. So what seems to be very easily affordable in many of the developed economies, like my panelists spoke, does not fit in as easily to the Indian landscape, and we have to be very aware of that. From the initial estimates that we have, we are saying that we would require about 70 gigawatt or 200 gigawatt of energy storage capacities in India, which is definitely one of the highest in the world. And this they are saying by 2022. To my mind, it seems pretty impossible at this point, but we have to see how far we can really go in that. I must also say that we already have around 25,000 megawatt or 25 gigawatt of gas-based power plant capacity, which has been created. Unfortunately, this has not been fully utilized because, again, the same question that gas prices have been high and the power sector cannot accept power which is at a certain rate, and therefore, despite being a cleaner fuel compared to coal, this is not being used as much. We're now seeing some signs of round-the-clock renewable energy, which should give some chance for such power plants to also be taken in as a balancing power by the renewable energy people. We're also seeing some of the renewable energy people looking at double storage or hydel storage projects along with their renewable energy projects to give you a round-the-clock solution. Now I'll come to just two big things which I think are the biggest roadblocks or challenges when it comes to India. You know, while the industry is pretty convinced of the need to go into the decarbonization path and the renewable path, one of the big problems we are finding is the grid balancing and grid challenges. And maybe it's at a nascent stage, but balancing the grid to see that how renewable gets integrated into the grid is challenging at this moment. Renewable is a new baby or a new entrant in the sector. And so the grid, which is much older, needs to find out how they can really do that in a way that it's balanced well. The second challenge is to do with transmission and evacuation. Now, the installation capacity has gone in at a much faster pace than what we have been able to do as far as transmission is concerned. So we are seeing mismatches there of installed capacity being in place, but nowhere to go. So it's like a Christmas tree, which is all decked up, but nowhere to go. So that is another problem, that how do we really scale up transmission facilities such that we can really see that the renewable energy that is coming in can also be evacuated at the same pace of adding up. Finally, like I said, India is a very diverse and spaced out country, if I may say. Affordability is a very big issue here. Accessibility is a very big issue here. A large part of our country, we have to look at mini grid solutions, distributed electricity solutions, and we cannot really reach our grid to everywhere. We have islands also as part of our states. And so that is another big factor which we have to keep in mind. And then one thing which usually goes unsaid, but is like an elephant in the room, is the political economy and consciousness of really getting the factors on the same board. India is a federal country. Electricity is a subject which is concurrent and therefore a federal subject. And we need the political minds to think the same way if we have to really go this way. I think I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Soma. I think bringing the light of the specific country conditions, which as a result define the possibilities both technologically but also in terms of policy, and the basically priorities that you have in terms of affordability and accessibility is highly relevant. So thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm going to have to unfortunately continue, but thanks a lot for joining us. So last but not least is I would like to turn to Mr. Gregory Dolan. He's the CEO of the Methanol Institute. Greg, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm not going to present your institute, but just wanted to say that you basically aim to ensure safe handling of methanol, promote industrial growth, and influence global regulatory and public policy. So among the most common barriers towards net carbon neutral transport is cost of alternative fuels, in particular in shipping and aviation. So from your perspective, what are the main policies required to reduce the costs of renewable methanol and basically scale up their use? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Robbie. Appreciate it. So methanol is the simplest alcohol with the highest hydrogen to carbon ratio of any liquid fuel. I know these days we all like to color code our fuels. There are two green methanol pathways, biomethanol and e-methanol, referred broadly as renewable methanol. Biomethanol is produced from either biomass gasification of waste products like forestry residue or municipal solid waste, or from biomethane collected from landfills, wastewater plants, or dairy farms used to make biomethanol. Now, e-methanol is produced from renewable electricity through electrolysis to make green hydrogen with the addition of CO2 from flue gases or direct air capture. As an electrofuel, e-fuel, or power to X, e-methanol is a practical way to store renewable electricity and CO2 in a convenient liquid molecule that can be easily moved around the world. That's one way we can ride that green wave. The technologies needed for renewable methanol production are mature. Both biomethanol and e-methanol are in commercial production today, but really scale is that critical issue. Now, for context, last year, global methanol consumption was 90 million metric tons, 115 billion liters, which is on a par with demand for the other alcohol used as a fuel, ethanol. Methanol is also one of the top 5 most widely shipped chemical commodities in the world. Now, a conventional natural gas-based methanol plant produces 5,000 tons of methanol per day. For biomethanol, yesterday I participated in a virtual opening ceremony for the Södra plant in Sweden, which uses forestry residue from pulp paper mills to produce 5,200 tons of biomethanol per year. For e-methanol, Carbon Recycling International in Iceland operates the world's largest plant, again, producing 4,000 tons of e-methanol per year. Earlier this year in China, the Dalian Institute of Chemical Physics commissioned a 1,000 ton per year solar fuel synthesis e-methanol demonstration plant. So for e-methanol in particular, the electrolyzer is the critical piece of kit. We need to see mass production of electrolyzers to not only support green hydrogen production, but also for e-methanol. In May, global shipping giant Maersk announced a project with wind technology leader Ørsted to build a sustainable fuels plant in Copenhagen to make up to 250,000 tons of e-fuels by 2030 from a total of 1.3 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. Maersk believes the output of this plant is an e-methanol for the use in their ships. But what we really need is more of these kinds of scale of projects to get to a low carbon economy. And then in terms of what's needed on the policy side, we need policies and regulations to really be technology neutral. Sticking with shipping, that means we need to look at marine propulsion from a well to wake basis. So low carbon and net carbon neutral fuels like methanol have an important role to play. Now, if we just focus on zero carbon fuels on a tank to wake basis, that means shippers can only use zero carbon fuels like batteries, hydrogen, ammonia. It really just narrows the options. Now, this week, Classification Society, DNV, released an update of their GHG pathway model, showing that as shipping emission regulations tighten in the 2030 to 2040 timeframe, biomethanol can be an option for both new builds and retrofits. In their decarbonization by 2040 scenario, instead of a transition via LNG, they see that the fleets will shift directly to carbon neutral e-methanol and e-ammonia. Now, we're pleased the Methanol to be working with ARENA right now on a joint technology outlook on renewable methanol. We expect to have it done in the next couple of weeks. It'll really have a deep dive into these issues of just what is renewable methanol, what are the technologies involved, cost of production, and the environmental benefits. So we're looking forward to that work with ARENA.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Greg. We're also looking forward to the work together. Thank you very much for all your insights from government and the private sector. I think my main takeaway is this need for a systems approach, and but that's true through the different layers that are required for the energy transition. We have, I think, 5 more minutes. I'm going to ask you just one question that came from the floor that I find interesting, and just briefly in 2 sentences, what do you think, or from your perspective, is the biggest challenge in this systemic approach for the transition? Institutional, political, technological, social, a combination of them. It's a difficult question, but if you were to choose in 2 sentences to say something about this more holistic approach required, what would you say? So I'm going to start backwards. Gregory?
Sure. I think we need a cross-sector approach. So if you look at methanol, we can use methanol as a fuel for cars, trucks, buses, ships, but we can also use methanol as a building block for the chemical sector, for petrochemicals. Paints, plastics, solvents, and resins all start with methanol. So methanol gives you that sort of cross-sector approach around industry and transport.
Thank you very much. Soma?
Yeah, so I mentioned political willingness, and I think here I would talk about global commitments, because we've seen what happened over the last few years with countries really pulling out of their commitments when it came to carbon and to do with what we can do for planet. So I think here we need to rise above our individual choices and really look at what it is comprehensively as the world needs to do when it comes to this, and that requires political willingness as well as ability to cross each other's geography, to look at the larger good and commit ourselves to.
Thank you. Very nice. So thank you very much, Soma. Ola?
Yeah, thanks. Well, a great question. I think I'll back to the need to encompass this vision that we're going to something better, and that will enable us to work together if we see that this is actually the road to have better lives going forward. And then a second point, look at the horizontal issues. I mean, hydrogen is a good point example. It's used in so many sectors. It's going to take integrated thinking to use it. So look at the horizontal issues and try and work together to how to enable them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ola. Amanda?
Thanks. Just building on what some of the other panelists have said in terms of the need to work together across sectors, I think really it comes down to culture change. It's the way people work both within governments, across different bodies within governments, but then also with other jurisdictions, be they subnational or be they international, as well as other sectors of society. So it's not always comfortable, or it might be different for government to work hand in hand with industry or with business or with the NGO sector. So I think, that underscores for me the importance of really aligning around where the shared objectives are in terms of what do you want the outcome to be, figuring out, what assets everyone brings to the table, and then figuring out how you can work together to fill each other's gaps. So really, I think it's a shift in the way of thinking.
Thank you. A paradigm shift. Thank you, Amanda. Michael?
Yes, thanks. Really continuing the thoughts my colleagues have already said. And when you ask the question, I very much think of now our hydrogen strategy in Germany, where we really start to build and develop a new area, and where I think the critical elements, is to have a shared vision of everybody, first the vision and the trust that this vision is really implemented into reality, as this will take years. So this is for the long run. We don't want this just to be a buzzword for 1-2 years. And then to have a good understanding where all the actors come in. What is the focused role of government to provide the support to build markets, somehow to overcome this hen and egg problem, to build demand and build supply, and somehow if there's no trust that this is really for serious, actors on both sides of the equation don't move. So that's probably the critical role of government here, to create that trust and to give the push on both the demand and the supply side to get the positive momentum rolling. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Absolutely. There's different dimensions to tackle, and definitely we count on you, on Germany, to lead the way on this. Thank you so much, Young.
Thank you very much. I think the most important thing and the important challenge is how to build consensus in terms of the perception and knowledge about the social problems in our life. Because if we talk about transport, everybody experiences it on a daily basis. So everyone can have a different view and different opinions about that. But we also have to know about mega trends in our society, where we are going and what can be our future like. And also we have to try to answer the mega questions. So unless we build consensus on these questions, basically we can be stuck on our silos, and it's really difficult to break through out of this very specific questions.
Thank you so much, Young. Thank you, everyone. On behalf of IRENA, I'd like to thank you for having participated to the Innovation Week. We have learned a lot from your insights, and we hope to continue collaborating very closely in the future. Thank you again. I'll give it back to Paul.
Thank you so much, Rabia, and really very many thanks to our speakers. Really insightful, really useful discussion. We've been taking lots of notes. Well, it's been a long but exciting week for us. Fantastic discussions, lots of valuable insights. We're running just 5 minutes or so behind schedule, but if you bear with us, in the next 5 or 6 minutes, we'll wrap things up. To do so, we're joined by IRENA's Director General, Francesco La Camera. He's going to deliver his closing remarks. Francesco, if you're there, can I hand the floor to you?
Oops. So I'm here, Paul, and thanks, grazie, for giving the floor, and also thanks for having moderated this very rich afternoon. So, dear all, as we reach the end of IRENA Innovation Week 2020, I would like to take this opportunity to reflect on the discussions in the last couple of days and express my appreciation to everyone that has contributed to this week. When we decided to move the event online, I was concerned we wouldn't have the engagement and impact of our past in-person Innovation Week event. But I have to say, I was very pleased that we are able to have a very detailed, rich, inspiring, and informative 4 days of discussion. It is, of course, a great shame not to be able to meet in person. But we lost in that personal contact, we gained in the diversity of speakers and attendees who could join. We had over 100 expert speakers from over 35 different countries, and the registered audience of over 2,100 from over 140 countries. As I said at the outset, getting on the 1.5 degree pathway will be very challenging. We need profound transformative change across all sectors of the economy, but especially industry and transport. We have barely begun our journey toward decabonisation. So our aim for this week was to bring together members from across IRENA's global membership and our diverse set of partners to provide a platform for exchanging ideas, mutual learning, and strengthening our cooperation. While the challenges are daunting, I think there is hope for the future that we can draw from the rapid and profound changes we are seeing in the power sector. Much of it owing to the ingenuity of innovators, entrepreneurs, pushing technological progress, but also to community, civil society,
a young people demanding and embracing a more sustainable way of life, as well as for side politicians enabling change. Both this Innovation Week and IRENA's ongoing work in this space show that there is a lot of ingenuity and creativity being focused on these challenges, and that we are beginning to see the emergence of innovative renewable-based solutions that can support decarbonization. As you heard from Dolf, the director of our Center for Research and Innovation in Bonn, since Monday, we have had 8 sessions with a diverse group of experts, speakers from industry, research institutes, and government. Each of those sessions showcased renewable-based solutions for the industry and transport sectors and explore the challenges and opportunities. And I would like to take this occasion to again thank our speakers for sharing their insight, as well as our partner organization working closely with us in the planning and delivery of each session, including the Electric Power Research Institute, the Hydrogen Council, the Global Bioenergy Partnership, the World Economic Forum, the International Transport Forum, and finally, help us to engage with young entrepreneurs, initiate and the SDG Youth constituency. We were also very pleased to be joined today by representatives of several of our members, as well as key partner organizations, including the COP26 and the COP25 and COP26 presidency, the Leadership Group of Industrial Transformation, Methanol Institute, and the Mission Innovation Initiative, who are all doing critical work. Last but not least, I would like to recognize the contribution of all IRENA staff who worked hard to make this week happen, despite the challenges posed by COVID. We look forward to building and strengthening this partnership and form new one as we tackle new challenges. We will be continuing our work to engage and support our members on the key topic discussed this week. For example, as we heard from Dolf, we will continue to publish analysis and convince stakeholders on key topics, including renewable fuels, sector coupling electrification, reducing electrolyzer cost, best practice policy measures for hydrogen, and analysis of the implication for jobs and others. For instance, on green hydrogen, which is one of the emerging solutions with exciting potential, we have, at the request of IRENA members, launched a collaborative framework which will enable us to engage more systematically and strategically with a wide set of stakeholders and existing initiatives on this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, finding solutions and approaches that enable us to create a more sustainable, equitable, and climate safe and just is one of the defining challenges of our time. And naturally, we're speaking about the energy system. The current pandemic has underscored the weakness of our system, but it's also show us what we can achieve by taking bold and decisive action, by encouraging innovation, and by cooperating. I hope that the global community will bring the same spirit and determination to recovering better and building a sustainable future. IRENA will continue this partnership with its members and all stakeholders and its leadership to accelerate the energy transition. Thanks again for your participation and contribution to the IRENA work. Thank you all. And Paul, back to you.
Thank you very much, Director General. And with that, we close IRENA's Innovation Week. Very many thanks to all who participated and engaged. Do watch out for the summaries, the slides, the session recordings, which can all be downloaded at the Innovation Week website. That's it from us for now, but we do hope you'll join us again in the future. Thank you and have a good day.